Have you actually read through the detail yourself, or are you just listening to the media storm?
Landlords are exiting. Half of the number of landlords were registering.
As a society, we trust our government and we believe they have our best interests at heart, but this is definitely not the case.
This has got to make its way through Parliament and the House of Lords, and there'll be a load of changes.
There are heavy fines, potential imprisonment, and to lose their right as being a landlord.
We've got some one-star reviews, and the one-star reviews have come from the rogue tenants.
You're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. You're wasting a lot of time and money.
You can't evict the cat.
All this stuff can be used as an opportunity.
Hi, Kevin MacDonald here. We're going to be speaking today about the Renters Reform Bill, which has been introduced by Parliament on the 17th of May 2023. I've been joined by Mark Homer, the co-founder of Progressive Property, and Kieran Tullett from Progressive Let's. So guys, obviously the Renters Reform Bill has been introduced a couple of weeks ago. There's a lot of stuff in here that can affect tenants, could affect landlords, even student-let properties. So I guess what's your thoughts on it? We can go as a President of Lettings, Kieran,
yeah,
I guess.
Sure.
What's your thoughts on
Thank you, Kevin.
bill?
So as Kevin mentioned, this was only introduced to the government on the 17th of May. So just to confirm, nothing is set in stone yet. Of course, this bill needs to go through first reading, which is what this is. Second reading, the House of Commons, House of Lords, before it achieves royal assent, basically before it becomes law in the UK. So I think that's important to remember that none of this is set in stone yet. Potentially there are things that could be changed, potentially things that could be added. So there's a few points in here which I suppose we're going to discuss today. The potential abolishment of the Section 21, the sort of strengthened grounds of the Section 8, and a few other little things. So I think we'll go through all of those points today, sort of give our opinions on that. And
before we do that, just for anyone watching, Section 21, Section 8, for anyone who's brand new to property, maybe just starting out in their property journey, could you give a little explanation of the difference between Section 21 and Section 8? Yeah,
so the Section 21 is, got this sort of buzzword of, the no-fault eviction, basically. It's something that the landlord has sort of within their armoury, if that's the correct word to use. If they want their property back, which ultimately is at the sort of, heart of the landlord's right. It's their property, and with reasonable notice, they should be able to get their property back. And this is what the Section 21 does. The landlord can serve this on their tenant. It's basically 2 months, and that particular tenant, has that 2-month period to find alternative accommodation. So again, the Section 21 can be served without grounds, basically. The Section 8 it has to be served on grounds, normally 2-month rent arrears, or it could be antisocial behaviour. So that's the sort of difference between the both.
Okay, and this new Renters Reform Bill is getting rid of Section 21.
Potentially, yeah. I think that's what's turned a lot of heads for both landlords and tenants, which may come as a surprise. Basically Michael Gove has said, part of this bill was to get rid of that because he deems it, as sort of unfair in the no-fault eviction. It's obviously turned a lot of heads for landlords because, as I've just touched upon, it's ultimately part of their fundamental right as the owner of the property. When they want their property back, they should be able to claim it back with serving adequate notice, which is the 2 months. I've personally, I've been working in this rented history now for private rental industry for about a decade now, and maybe I'm one of the fortunate ones. I've never been approached by a landlord to say, I'm going to go to my property tomorrow, knock on the door and ask for the keys back, and they must leave. There's laws in this country that protect tenants. It's deemed an illegal eviction, and there are heavy fines, potential imprisonment, and potentially the right to lose their right as being a landlord. So I think the Section 21 is definitely one that's turning a lot of heads at the moment for landlords.
What's really interesting today is I'm obviously a landlord, Mark's a landlord with multiple properties. Kieran's actually a tenant, so I'm going to get some thoughts on Kieran about the tenant side as well as being a renter. But Mark, as an investor, as somebody with a large property portfolio, what's your thoughts on the bill?
Well, all I've been reading is that landlords are exiting. Obviously, they have been exiting because of interest rate rises and other legislation and Section 24, but this is accelerating it. Read another article this morning, something like half of the number of landlords were registering than was the case a year ago. So, that's quite a big deal, really. For me, yes, this is going to have challenges in it. When I was speaking to one investor not that long ago who says he uses the Section 8 anyway and doesn't really use the Section 21, because let's be honest, which landlord actually wants to kick their tenants out because, just because they want the property back or for any other reason? What is 98% of 98% of cases are they're not paying the rent, so you want to have them evicted, or as is the case now, Kieran and I are doing lots of rent rises. I want to get rents up to within about 5 to 10% of market value. And if they don't agree, to a fair rent rise, which is actually below market value, then I may use a Section 21. If they, Kieran and I have constant discussions about, we'll have a negotiation. Do you know what I mean? And if they negotiate, we want to keep them. So 98% of the time, landlords actually don't want to use the provisions of the Section 21. They just use the 21 because it is a sort of catch-all, fail-safe, because they're worried that if they go to court and say there are rent arrears and then the tenant comes up with, pays a little bit more of the rent down, then they might not meet the Section 8 criteria, or, there are other reasons why that can fail. So yes, the Section 8 probably is the correct thing to use, and actually it shouldn't make a huge amount of difference. Now that we understand that the Section 8 is the amendments to the Section 8 are such that if a tenant is more than 3 times in arrears, and I understand from you earlier that could be even by 1 day and by any amount, more than 3 times, then you can apply for the Section 8. Obviously, we haven't seen the detail yet. The devil will be in the detail. Are there lots of other reasons why the application can fail to the court? And if there aren't, and they are genuinely beefing up the Section 8, then honestly, as a sort of slightly, slightly selfish landlord sort of sitting here thinking, I quite like it all, because, reduction in landlords means
increased rent,
less supply of property. This is all that's happening. I was talking to Nigel Farage on GB News about this a couple of weeks ago. Rents in this area have gone from £550 on a little 3-bed in 2016. Kieran's now getting £950 on the same sort of property. And that is largely because of this sort of stuff, putting landlords off. So I don't see it as all bad. What you need to do is learn about this stuff, understand it, and I wouldn't go too deep into it at the moment because it's not there yet, and obviously there will be amendments to it, and as it goes to the Lords there'll be further amendments. In fact, it got withdrawn a few weeks ago, and at one point Labour was saying, the Conservatives have backed away and they're not going to push it through at all. So it'll get changed, but once it's there, you just need to understand what the provisions are, and I think letting agencies are already gearing up for it. They will find a way to deal with it, and they're just going to have to become better at using the provisions of the Section 8. Some landlords I talk to prefer the Section 8 anyway to the 21 because there are provisions in it which they prefer. But lots of agents have become used to just using the catch-all, which is the landlord has the ability to ask the tenant to leave for any reason, which is what the Section 21 gives them. So, is it such a big deal? Yes, you're going to need to learn stuff. Yes, letting agents are going to have to work a little bit harder and learn new legislation and change their processes and procedures. But that isn't a bad thing. It's certainly having the effect of putting lots of landlords off and getting lots of them, instead of them remortgaging, they're selling. Loads of them are selling, which means less supply. Yeah, I don't want to evict tenants if they're paying their rent at anything like market rent.
Better the devil you know. Better the devil you know. Yeah. And
I suspect you still will be able to evict if you're, going to sell the property. Or I haven't seen all the provisions, but I suspect if there's some major development planned, that sort of stuff, you'll still be able to get it back. If I sit on the other side of the fence, and I was a tenant once, and some, there's been a few occasions where I have considered renting a property. The thing that has really put me off is I can't do any work to this place, and I'm always worried that the landlord could just serve me with 2 months' notice, and you must feel that, Kieran. So from a sort of personal point of view, that has always put me off. And
I guess from us as landlords, rogue landlords give good landlords like us a bad name, and rogue landlords will do what they do, and this will help get rid of a lot more rogue landlords.
I hope it does, I hope it, because some of them might say, oh well, you want too much maintenance done, or you're causing me I don't like it, whatever, and issue a Section 21 or threaten it as a sort of catch-all mechanism. But you're right, we're here, following the regulations and trying to stay within all the guidelines. So it should be a benefit. I just hope it doesn't drive them further underground, because there are lots of landlords who just don't bother with licensing and all this sort of stuff. And we tend to pay the price for that.
So I just want to cut in for a moment. We've covered a lot of good detail on the bill so far. We've still got more to come. However, in the meantime, if you want to take advantage of the Renters Reform Bill, if you want to take advantage of the opportunities that are going to come out of this for you to get into property, to find bargain properties right now, then there is a completely free report. You can download it in the pinned comments and in the description that can help you get started in property right now and take advantage of what is happening out there. There is some big bargains at the moment, so go download that report and get yourself moving on your property journey. Let's get back to the discussion. I know from my perspective, I've never evicted a tenant that hadn't had a problem. So if they've either caused damage or they've not paid the rent or whatever it may be, even upset the neighbours. I don't think I've ever even kicked them out for upsetting the neighbours.
Very rare.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's more.
Yeah,
rent.
Same here.
Yeah.
We'd sort of we'd put up with a lot.
But I'd always use the Section 21 to do that, because the rent arrears with a Section 8. If I used this is what my thought process was. If I used the Section 8, I could chase them for the rent arrears afterwards. But they didn't have the money to pay it anyway, so you're never going to get it. Or you'll get £1 a week for about 10 months or something, and then you never get any more. So with a Section 21, no fault eviction, you can't chase the rent arrears, but you've got rid of them easier and quicker. So the data the government have used for this will be very incorrect, where they've not took into account that probably 50, 60, 70% of Section 21 notices were really Section 8s in disguise.
I think that's probably true. I mean, often when we issue notice, when they haven't been paying the rent, do we do a Section 8 and a Section 21?
Yeah, normally we do both, just to cover both grounds. Going back to the Section 8, I think landlords find more comfort in the Section 21 because it's almost that safety net ultimately. With the Section 8, it has to be on grounds. It's easy to show evidence of rent arrears. However, trying to show evidence on antisocial behaviour can be very difficult, and that's where you experience it being chucked at court. You'll go to court, you go through all of that process, you'll make the payments to go to court. When it actually gets there, your evidence has to be so strong, around antisocial behaviour and stuff like that. You're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. You're wasting a lot of time and money going through that.
I think a lot of landlords are panicking about this bill and either getting out of the market or for fear rather than fact. And a lot are worried about not getting into it again for fear rather than fact.
They don't even know what it is yet.
They don't know what it is.
All they know is that the media has been making a load of noise and upsetting them.
Yeah, because bad news sells.
Yeah, of course it does.
So, in here as well, one of the big things is you mentioned there about if you were looking to sell the property. It actually states in the bill that so long as your tenant's in place for 6 months or more, you can give them notice to leave if you are either moving into the house yourself or selling it.
Yeah, correct.
So if you're not moving into it and not selling it and just want to rent it to a tenant, and you're able to charge market rent and you've got a good tenant, why would you get rid of a good tenant paying market rent to move in a potentially bad tenant who doesn't pay?
You absolutely wouldn't. It's just, you wouldn't do that.
Yeah. So there's, I guess for everybody who's panicking about the media story of this bill, is have you actually read through the detail yourself, or are you just listening to the media storm? Because like everything, you've been in property now, what, 20 years?
About that.
Yeah, I've been doing it badly for 10 and well for 10, so a bit less better. In that time, we've seen loads of changes. The tax changes. You mentioned Section 24 earlier.
Letting agents' fees.
Yeah.
That was going to be a major thing. Arrangement fees had to go. Referencing, and then there's various ways around that now. They still do pay a fee up front, which you're allowed to charge for referencing. There's been Section 24. There's been stamp duty increases, licensing up the wazoo. Everywhere, they tend to want licensing. Right to rent checks, Legionella checks, smoke detector checks every 3 months. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Fire safety bill. There's a load of fire stuff just been introduced.
And yet, with all that,
you find a way around it.
Yeah.
So the rent has to go up to pay for this stuff, and that's what's happened. And you find a way around it.
So I guess the point of that is there's always be changes. There always will be. There'll be, after this removal of Section 21, there'll be an introduction of Section 39 or 56 or whatever will come next. But will there always be buy-to-let landlords? Will there always be tenants? Absolutely. And to make a buy-to-let landlord will only be there if they can make money. And with all of this stuff coming in, the only way for them to make money will be less supply, more rent, and an opportunity potentially for those landlords that are fearful and leaving the market, an opportunity to pick up some bargain properties.
I think that's probably the case. Yeah. I think the other part that was interesting was this landlord register.
Yes.
Yes, Michael Gove's made a lot of this and sort of said, oh, well, landlords are all going to have to be registered because they're nasty people, and it might be a public register. It sounds like it probably will be. Haven't we already got that with licensing? There's already a public register.
HMO register, selective licensing
around
register.
Here they'll be introducing another selective licensing scheme. A lot of the town, requires a license on a rented property, and I'm sure lots of councils up and down the country, that's the same. Most of them have moved to that situation anyway. So, fine, let them do another register. But what's the difference? Yeah.
And the ones that miss out on that register again are the rogue landlords who don't put themselves on there.
License.
Yeah, I think that's the driving or the selling point behind it, isn't it? I think it goes back to the whole 80-20% rule, isn't it? There's a very small selection of rogue landlords, if that's the term to put it, which is really affecting majority of good landlords. Again, maybe I'm one of the fortunate ones that have only experienced good landlords, good properties, and therefore good tenants.
Well, you don't let them in, you won't manage them.
But you mean as a tenant, as a renter, or on both? Because you're both sides of the fence, aren't you? Yeah. You're a letting agent, but you're also a tenant. As a tenant, have you ever rented off a rogue landlord?
No.
Now, is that because you've always been a good tenant?
Yeah, I think there's many factors. One being a good tenant, ultimately you have to take responsibility as well, do your own due diligence. There are places out there where, such as Rightmove, Zoopla and stuff where,
I'll give you an example. So in our shop, we've got like our Google reviews or whatever, and we've got some 1-star reviews. And the 1-star reviews have come from the rogue tenants, the ones that have caused antisocial behaviour, not paid the rent, damaged houses, graffitied walls, etc. And then when they leave, they go on and go, oh, terrible landlord, because he didn't let me destroy his house. So are all rogue landlords, there is rogue landlords, but is there also rogue landlords that are highlighted, rogue landlords that are not because they got rid of the rogue tenant? So
for sure.
You've never encountered a rogue landlord. But
fortunately not.
I think it's where you find the property. So if you go to a reputable letting agency, say Progressive Lets, so Kieran would work for Progressive Lets, and I don't know, what are you managing, 1,300 tenants or something like that?
Close to that.
They're regulated, part of an ombudsman scheme, all that sort of stuff. If they have a landlord who comes in and says, oh, I want to run a HMO, I don't want to license it, all the rest of it.
You won't take them on.
They just won't take them on. And if they try and do it halfway through, then Wayne will just say, well, we can't offer you a service anymore, and kick them out. So, and I imagine that with most of the big, reputable letting agencies in this town, it'll be the same thing. So if you go and rent from,
direct to landlord without an agency.
Well, exactly. I think you're probably going to find
that risk, aren't you?
More, direct to landlord.
I suppose put in a different scenario. So if you were to buy a car from, Steve down the road, or you walk into a dealership, you know, you're taking that risk, aren't you? Potentially there's going to be problems. If you go directly to a landlord who's advertising his property on Facebook or something like that,
bigger risk.
It'll be different.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
That's a very good point. From a rental perspective, as a tenant, having reviewed the bill, and most tenants won't review the bill, so if you've got people listening in that are renting right now, what's your thoughts on this from a tenant's perspective? Obviously this has been put in place and the government is saying this is to help tenants. So as a tenant, having actually read it, because let's be honest, 99% of tenants will never read this. It's landlords that'll read it, and most landlords won't even read it. What's your thoughts as somebody who actually rents a property off a landlord?
Yeah, appreciate that, Kevin. You're correct in what you said. You know, a lot of tenants aren't going to pay attention to this, and I think a lot of people out there, not just tenants, just as a society, we trust in, you know, our government, and we believe they have our best interests at heart. But this is definitely not the case. I think you can simply start with the word reform. To me, my understanding is to make something better, where I think this bill is going to be doing a complete opposite for both tenants and landlords. I think, you know, it's a continued set of policies in here, you know, which is making it extremely difficult for landlords around, you know, the whole sort of environmental side of things, or the EPC criteria coming in to effect in 2025. What we've covered already with the, you know, inability to offset interest against rent with the Section 24, and, you know, potentially now, you know, the abolishment of Section 21. And there's definitely a, you know, misconception around landlords. I think it's, you know, good, give the greedy landlords what they deserve, but ultimately this is just going to cause a negative downward spiral, which will impact tenants. Ultimately, this is where I see this going. In
what ways do you think it could impact tenants?
So as we just touched upon just a moment ago, you know, we're all aware, and probably the viewers are as well, there's definitely a house shortage out there. So a lot of landlords who read this, you know, and don't dive a bit deeper into it, you know, they may become a bit wary, a bit cautious, and, you know, decide to sell up. And, you know, it's basic supply and demand, isn't it? You know, if, you know, low supply, then the rents will be higher. So ultimately, you know, rents will become higher if there is, you know, less demand out there. For landlords, obviously it's good, but that's probably potentially one of the impacts on tenants that will, you know, spiral down to tenants.
And obviously if rents start to go higher, more tenants will end up going away from high street letting agents to find a landlord, and they end up finding another rogue landlord.
Probably.
Or they'll, you know,
without all this legislative cost.
Exactly. Yeah. Or they'll go down to the local council, we need a house, sorry, we haven't got houses. You know, so it's a vicious circle, unfortunately.
In Scotland during the pandemic, they introduced a rent cap. And when they introduced the rent cap, what happened was landlords with empty properties massively hiked their rents, and tenants couldn't afford, that needed property, couldn't afford the higher rent. Now they massively hiked the rent because they thought, well, if there's a rent cap, I'll put my rent high to move in, so that because I know I can't increase it afterwards. But that meant that people in another property that was a bit cheaper, let's say somebody wants to move, so they're in a relationship, the relationship breaks down, one of them needs to move out and rent somewhere else, but they're not going to leave a cheap rental property to move into two separate, more expensive ones. So they end up staying in somewhere they don't want to stay, maybe in a relationship they want to stay in, or whatever it may be, or don't want to move to another part of the country because the rents will be higher. So do you think, as a tenant in a property with this new bill, that staying with a landlord, it'll force a lot of tenants to stay with the landlord at the moment rather than move to another landlord?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, they keep going on about improving the private rented sector and making it difficult for rogue landlords, but as you just touched upon, it's potentially putting those tenants who do live in, you know, bad quality properties, who are, you know, run by rogue landlords, you know, at greater risk. So for sure, yeah.
There's another part in here about pets as well. So tenants have to request permission to have pets, but then if they request permission, we have to allow pets?
Not necessarily allow. I mean, again, this is something that's already, you know, active now. You know, if a tenant does, you know, approach you to rent your property and they do ask a question such as, would you consider pets? You know, there's, you know, a lot of reasons why landlords can say no to that. One could be, you know, sort of block management, if it's, you know, definitely sort of apartments and stuff like that. I think this bill is just basically saying they have to give basically better reason behind it, but it's not that you must you know, if they say they've got a pet, that's it, the pet's moving in. It's not quite saying that.
I mean, the thing with the pets is, if you come to me and you say someone's got a dog and they want to bring it in the property, the first thing I think is, well, is the dog going to ruin the property?
Which dog?
Yeah, which dog, and is it going to ruin the property? And often then you say, oh, well, we'll take a little bit more as a deposit, or, you know, they'll have to clean the carpets on the way out, whatever, and then I'll agree to it. In this, they're sort of saying, well, yes, there will be a right for tenants to request permission to keep a pet in the property, and landlords will be limited in the circumstances which consent may be refused, but appropriate insurance cover will need to be arranged. Well, if there is insurance...
Who's paying for it?
Well, the tenant. The tenant will have to pay for it, surely.
Yeah, well, I think...
If there is insurance in place, which will pay for damage that the pet, causes in the property, and we're happy the insurance is actually going to pay, i.e. it catches everything, landlords aren't going to be bothered by that. No. They'd be quite pleased. They keep the tenant there longer. So I don't really see that as an issue, but it's just another cost that the tenant's going to have to pay.
It is, because at the moment we've got a lot of properties with tenants with pets, and one of the big advantages of a property with a tenant with pets is that tenant can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
They stay with us for years and years and years, because when they try and go somewhere else, the landlord says, we don't take pets.
Yeah.
And it's almost a niche in itself of tenants with pets.
Yeah.
And here, now we're going to say, thank you, you can still stay, but you're going to have to pay more for an insurance policy.
Yeah.
And now we're better again, because if there is damage, it's paid for.
Exactly. And some of them just bring pets anyway without telling you. I mean,
true.
You must have loads of that. They don't tell you. Pets just go in and crack on. If there's no damage, we don't say anything anyway.
We had a HMO during lockdown with 5 tenants stayed at home during lockdown. They bought a cat.
Yeah.
But then what happened was they bought a cat, but obviously none of them decided who bought the cat. So since the lockdown finished, all 5 tenants that were there when the cat was arrived have left, but the cat's still there. So some interesting stuff can happen as a landlord too. You can't evict the cat. What else is in here, guys, that we haven't covered yet? This rental formula thing is, it doesn't even make sense.
I don't even get it.
Yeah, to be honest, I've not read too much about that. There is no rent cap
at the moment, and there's no rent cap proposed in this, or rent control or anything like that. So in generic terms at the moment, I think there's a fair rent officer, and they work for a subsidiary of the VOA, the Valuation Office. So this hasn't really happened since the pandemic, but prior to, Steph, who manages the letting agency, would supply our average rents for certain properties. Fair rent officer would have a look and sort of go, right, any rent increases need to be within the sort of market rate, and she's going to work that out by looking at all the other rents that we're achieving on other properties. I suspect this is going to be something similar. There's also going to be the amount of notice you've got to give. At the moment,
1 month they're changing it to 2.
Yeah, so they're making it 2.
Yeah, but
and you can't do it in the first 6 months.
Yeah, I think
we're going to do it once a year. All that stuff. Sorry. Kim.
Yeah, I think, preparation here is, I suppose, some sort of key to elevation. Every time we've sat down together, Mark, and we're looking through rent increases, we tend to give way more than a month anyway.
Yeah.
By law, Mark and landlords are only supposed to give a month, but I think if you look in advance and diarise these things, you try to give them a lot of time.
Because especially if at the moment rents are going up a lot, and they're going to get a reasonable rent increase, and they can't afford it. I'd rather sort of know now, and also they know, and they've got 6 months then to prepare.
Well, that's it.
Look for somewhere else or whatever.
That there is a little bit of a nugget as well, because since that sort of process that we do, we tend to have less comeback from tenants. When it's normally a month, they have less time to sort of deal with it, plan for it.
Well, it's not fair, really, is it?
Exactly.
So we bought a portfolio last year, and all the rents were really low. And when we came in we didn't go in and go, okay, hey, new landlord, hi, here's a rent increase. We made a decision to leave it 9 months, let them have 9 months getting used to us, and then introduce the rent increase in the back of the fact it's not been done in years. So it's the difference between how do you run your business, and are you that rogue landlord that's just taking advantage of everything in the system?
It is better with rent rises to go little and often. So we've got stuff where it might be at 650 and actually the market's at 900. So obviously you're not going to go from 650 to 900, but you might try and go 50 to 100 pounds a year and then keep it. That's what we've been doing, because if you let it get too far behind, it's such a big jump and it's very difficult to catch up.
One in here about students as well. So obviously the student-let market would typically, students move into a property on a multi-let basis, maybe four friends or whatever together. They'd sign a 12-month contract on that property.
Yeah.
How do you think this bill is going to affect student-let properties? Because they don't want to stay there for the next 25 years. They just want to stay there for a year, maybe.
I think there's been a lot of opposition, and they say they're going to amend it for students because, of course, students do leave at the end of the 12 months, and that's the normal sort of rhythm. That's the normal course of events. So I suspect that will be amended. The thing is, this is all supposition. This has got to make its way through Parliament and the House of Lords, and there'll be a load of changes along the way.
That's the key bit. This has just actually been introduced to Parliament. It's not been approved by Parliament.
Yeah, it's just first reading, isn't it?
So it'll probably look, by the time it's finished, completely different to this. And they might start all over with a blank piece of paper.
Well,
rather than having this.
Yeah, they'll make amendments, I'm sure.
Is anything else in here that we've not picked up on that you think is the key point? Because yes, there's a lot of changes, but actually you can still evict a bad tenant. You can still rent to tenants. Yeah. You can still collect the rent. You can still have pets, but now we can get insurance against them. There's not really anything different. It's just life as normal, really, isn't it? Apart from you'd go down Section 8 instead of Section 21.
Yeah, I think it's just the same, really, isn't it? You know, tenants are, you know, going to feel the impact, obviously, you know, extra charges that they'll potentially have to pay for with pet insurance, and there are sort of extra charges in here which landlords are going to have to pay for, such as being a part of that property portal. There's going to be a fee being, you know, registered to the ombudsman that they want to create, and they've said per property. I don't know whether that for HMOs, if that's going to be per room. So that'll be interesting to see how much that fee is.
There's one other thing I had a thought on is and this could have a big impact, is you would often, and I see this a lot from landlords, they might remove a tenant to refurbish a house, you know, fit a new kitchen, paint it, decorate it, do it up, where they can't maybe do that work while the tenant's there, replace the kitchen, bathroom, etc. Do you think this could actually affect where a lot of rental properties will not get refurbished as much or to as high a spec because they're going to be, you can't get the tenant out to do the full refurb?
I think that could be the case. I mean, we are going through a process now of trying to refurb some flats and just, you know, improve the quality of them. And we'll often try and move them into other places, rooms and all that sort of stuff.
But we can't do that as easily.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what you're going to do. That's one reason why we're getting on with it now.
I mean, can from this bill, can we still, because we would literally, we've got a block of 6 flats, or if we take on a HMO and there might be 3 rooms filled out of 5, we'd say to the tenant in one room, do you want to move to a different, we'll do what we've done up this room, do you want to move to that room and then we'll do up yours? Can we move a tenant from one room to another within a HMO? That's a change of tenancy.
Yeah,
well, at the moment
clarity.
we don't know, do we?
Exactly. There's not clarity on that.
So, and that is the little sort of bits where it'll be more difficult to actually help the tenants as well, surely.
Absolutely, and it'll end up just places will go to rack and ruin. Yeah.
So final thoughts on the bill?
Yeah, as I touched upon briefly just a moment ago, just, you know, there's sort of pros and cons about it for both, you know, tenant and landlord. It's not all doom and gloom. I think we should just, you know, continue to be patient and wait. You know, as we touched upon, this is just simply the first reading. There's probably potentially a lot of changes to come of this. So I think, yeah, just hold fire at the moment. I don't think panic. Don't do anything too major at the moment.
Cheers, Kieran.
Yeah.
Mark?
All this stuff can be used as an opportunity. You know, as interest rates go up, you get more of this. And you get, you know, more legislation and more negative news. Just means there are less people buying, and it means, you know, I think prices have already, in reality, in many areas like Peterborough, they've dropped probably 10-15%. I know the, you know, the ONS and the average data coming out of Nationwide says it's 3%, but you can get stuff 10-15% cheaper now, and in some cases more than that. And the yields are going up, the rents are going up. So just use it, you know. Adjust your sale and use it as an opportunity to get better stock for more rent. Cheaper, you know, you can buy it cheaper, can't you?
Go against the tide, as Mark says.
Yeah, absolutely. So from my point of view, I'm excited by it because when you're trying to buy, if you're on the investment side trying to buy property, you can use this with landlords to push down your price and be, you know, while others are fearful, you should be greedy. And there's a lot of fear out there right now, and this can be a big opportunity for you to grab absolute bargains, because there will be landlords not understanding this, not reading it properly, and what they'll be doing is they'll be trying to get out of the marketplace, they'll be panicking about all of this stuff, and it gives you an opportunity to pick up properties at a discount, knowing that People will be renting properties from private landlords in this country in 100 years' time. So why should they not be renting them from you next year, this year, 3 years' time? There will always be rental property. The question is, will it be you renting them, or will it be you the one that's selling them at a discount out of fear? Fear never wins, but there'll always be winners in property, so long as you're educated, you understand what you're doing, and you know how to take advantage of these types of things when they come out. One person's loss is somebody else's gain. It's which side you decide to be on. So thank you guys, Kieran and Mark, for coming in and sharing your thoughts with us today. I've been Kevin McDonald. The guys have been awesome as always. We'll see you next time. So that is the full breakdown of the Renters Reform Bill. There is some positives and some negatives in there, but here is the thing. If you are looking to get started in property, now is a huge time to take advantage of the opportunities that are out there. One person's problem is another person's opportunity. There will always be landlords, there will always be investors, there will always be people making money from property. The question is, do you want to be one of those people? If you do, there is a completely free report. You can download it right now. It's in the pinned comments and it's in the description that can give you the detail you need to get started on your property investment journey. Go download it right now and make this year your year. If you've enjoyed the content, if you've liked what you're hearing from the channel, make sure you like, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss future content. I've been Kevin McDonald, you've been amazing, I'll see you next time.